How was your day? Maybe someone today decided what kind of person you were, before you'd really had the chance to show them anything different. There's a boy in the Arthurian legends who was born under a prophecy. Before he could speak, the king was already afraid of him. His name was Mordred. If today felt a little like that, he'd understand. Tonight we're going to spend an hour with him. You don't have to stay awake for the ending. The story has been waiting 1,500 years. It can wait for you to drift off too. Picture a wide field of brown bracken, the smell of wet grass and oak smoke. Two armies facing each other across the mist. At the center, a father. At the other end, his son. They both know how this ends. They've both been told. And still, they walk forward through the bracken, step by step, the way people do when there's nothing left to choose. Here's the part the stories don't quite say out loud. Mordred wasn't born evil. He was born inconvenient, the kind of child a kingdom would rather forget. A prophecy was spoken when he was still in the womb. The king who would one day be his father was told, "This child will be your ending," and the king believed it. It's an old question. Older than this story. What does it do to a person? To know that the people who made you would rather you weren't here at all, that's where we begin. This is what we do here. Every week one story, one night. Something that happened a long time ago, and still has something to say about how we live now. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow, find your warmth. If you drift off before the end, the old kings won't mind. They've watched over sleeping listeners for a long time. This is only the beginning of the story. The part most people never reach, that's still ahead. But not tonight. Tonight just this. Just the start. If tonight felt like something, subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another story, another night like this one. Now back to ours. So we go back. Before the battle, before the betrayal, before the prophecy was even spoken. To a stretch of cliffs called Tintagel, on a night thick with fog. Two people crossed paths there. A young king who didn't yet know he was a king. A woman who already knew far more than she said. The fog was so thick neither saw the other clearly. What happened that night? The stories tell it different ways. Some say enchantment. Some say willingness. Some say no one truly knew until much later. But a child began in the dark. By the time the young king understood who the woman had been, it was already done. She was his half-sister. The child was already growing, and the old white, bearded counselor was already afraid. A prophecy was spoken in the grove that morning. Few people heard it. The king heard it. He never repeated the exact words. He didn't have to. He'd already decided what to do. Far north on the windswept coast of Orkney, the child was born under a low gray sky. His mother named him Mordred. The gulls heard it first. The sea heard it next. The wind on Orkney never really stopped. It came off the sea and rattled the shutters of the low stone house all night. The child grew up with that sound for a lullaby. He had no brothers his own age. Morgoth's older sons were grown men, away at courts of their own. The boy learned to play alone, walking the black cliffs above the gray sea. His mother watched him from the windows. She didn't smile much, but she didn't look away either. There was something in her face, something between love and accounting. She had not chosen to raise him in the south. Camelot had offered. Camelot had hinted. She had refused. The boy would grow up where the king's eye couldn't quite reach. The boy didn't know any of this. He thought all children grew up like he did. With a sea that never went quiet, a mother who weighed her words, a sky that was almost never blue. He asked once about his father. He was 5 years old. His mother set down the spindle in her lap. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, later, he didn't ask again for a long time. That's a thing children learn, when not to push. He learned it earlier than most. He learned it the way other children learn to walk. The fishermen who lived below the cliffs took an interest in him. He'd appear at the rocks where they mended nets, silent, watching their hands. They taught him knots before letters. He liked the knots. There was a rightness to them. Each one held only if you pulled it the right way. Pull wrong, and it came apart in your fingers. It seemed to him like the truth about most things. He was 7 when the first old man came to the house in dark robes. He came in the evening. He asked to see the boy. Mordred sent the boy to bed early. The walls were thin. He heard only fragments, words like prophecy, like blood right, like Camelot, and one word, said quietly. The way grown-ups say important things, his own name. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the rectangle of moonlight on the floor move across the stones. By morning, he had decided he was going to learn whatever it was they wouldn't say to him. That was the year his mother started teaching him to read. Not the trade, script the fishermen used for tallies. Real letters, Latin and Old British, the kind of words a king might write. She didn't tell him why she was doing it. She didn't tell him what she was preparing him for. She only said, once quietly, "You will need this, trust me on this much." He learned quickly. He had nothing else competing for his attention. The sea was always there. The wind was always there. The book was the only thing that asked him to come closer. He was 8 when the second old man came. This one wore the silver, gray robes of a druid. He stayed 3 nights. He asked to see the boy's hands. He said nothing about why. When the druid left, the boy asked his mother what he had seen. She thought for a long time. Then she said, "He saw the shape of your road. He will not tell us, that is the rule." The boy didn't understand. He thought about it for a long time afterward. A road he couldn't see, a shape he hadn't chosen, something the grown-ups were not allowed to name. That winter the storms came hard. 3 fishermen drowned in a single night. The whole settlement gathered at the cliffs in the morning to watch the wreckage wash in. He watched the families weep. He watched the old men carry the boards up the cliff path. He didn't cry. He didn't know any of the dead by name. He didn't know yet that grief had a shape. That night his mother held him in her lap, longer than usual. He was getting too old to sit there. He didn't say so. He could feel her thinking. He waited. She said, "I have to tell you something soon." "Not yet, but soon. And after I tell you, things will be different. Just stay small for one more winter. Just one." He nodded against her shoulder. She kept her promise. He turned 9 in the spring. The night of his birthday, she took him up to the cliffs alone. She brought a single oil lamp. She wrapped him in her own dark mantle. She sat him down on a flat stone. She sat beside him. She didn't look at him while she talked. She looked at the dark sea. It made it easier to say. She said, "Your father is the king at Camelot. His name is Arthur. He is also my half-brother. Neither of us knew the night you began. That was the first thing the world did wrong by you," she said. When his counselor told him a son of mine would one day bring his end, he believed it. He believed it enough to do something. That was the second thing the world did wrong by you. He gathered every child born that same season. He sent them out to sea in a single boat. He told himself the gods would sort it. The gods did not sort it kindly. Most of those children did not survive. There was one. He washed ashore on a beach south of here. A fisherman's family took him in. They didn't know his name. They named him again. That child grew up not knowing. His mother found him later. She took him back. He has another name now. The king does not know. The king believes that boat ended every child on it. His mother turned her face back to her own son. To Mordred, she said, "That boy is not you. You were not on that boat. I would not let them have you. You are mine. You have always been mine." He didn't cry. He didn't ask any more questions that night. He looked at the dark sea where the boat had been. He thought about all those other children. He felt very old suddenly. He turned back to his mother. He asked one question. The only one that mattered. Why does he get to be king then? If he did that, why him? She didn't answer right away. Eventually she said, "Because the world does not always give the throne to the deserving. It gives it to whoever was there first, with the right name, on the right day and good counsel." He thought about that for a long time. He thought about it for months. He carried that sentence around like a small stone in a pocket, taking it out, turning it over, putting it back. He didn't tell his mother what he was thinking. He didn't tell the fisherman. He didn't tell anyone. But the shape of him began to change. It was small. At first, you'd have to be watching closely. She started teaching him the sword. He was small for it. The old practice blades were nearly his own height. He didn't complain. He gripped the wooden hilt until his knuckles went white. She didn't teach him to be flashy. She didn't teach him to be brave exactly. She taught him to be patient, to wait, to let the other person be the one who got tired first. He took to it the way he had taken to the knots. There was a rightness in it. The blade did what your body told it. Your body did what your patience told it. It came down to who could stay still longer. He grew. The winters passed. He was 11, then 12, then 14. He was already taller than most boys his age. He didn't smile much. The fishermen still liked him. He was 16 when the first letter came from the south. It had a red wax seal pressed with a dragon. His mother held it for a long time before she broke it open in front of him. She read it twice. She set it down. She said, "He is asking for any of my sons of age who wish to come to Camelot to take a place at the round table. It would be his honor to receive them." Now, let me pause the boy on his cliff for a moment to tell you something about prophecies in the Celtic world. Because they are not what we think they are in modern stories. A modern prophecy says, "This will happen," like a forecast. The Celtic prophecy says something different. It says, "This is the shape of the road if no one steps off it." Few people ever step off it. That's the cruel part. The prophecy doesn't make people do anything. People make people do it. The prophecy just describes what people usually do when they know what was said. If Arthur had never been told, Mordred would have been a boy raised in Orkney, who learned to mend nets, and grew up to be a quiet earl somewhere on the northern coast, perhaps a good one. But Arthur had been told, and Arthur acted, and the boy grew up knowing his own father had tried to drown him before he could speak. The road takes its shape from that knowledge, not from fate. He didn't answer the letter for 2 weeks. His mother didn't push. She knew not to. She watched him walk the cliffs every evening. She watched him sit at the table some nights and not eat. One night he came in late and stood in the doorway of his mother's chamber. She was at her loom. She didn't look up. He said, "I have decided. I want to go." She didn't speak for a long time. The shuttle in her hand started moving again. The loom clicked softly. Finally, she said, "I knew you would. I needed you to choose it."
"Not me? Good?"
She asked him, "What will you do when you stand in front of him, when you finally see his face?" He thought for a while. He said, "I will say nothing. I will watch. That is all for now." She nodded. She liked the answer. She said, "Good. Be patient." Patience is the only thing in this story that has ever served us. Be patient and let the king feel watched. That winter was the longest of his life. The sea was a flat gray wall every morning. He trained harder than he ever had. The fishermen noticed. They didn't ask. They knew the look. His mother packed for him a wool cloak, a linen shirt, a small carved wooden disc he had loved as a baby. She didn't pack any softness. She packed only the things he would actually need. The morning he left was clear. The first clear morning in months. The sea was almost blue. He took it as a sign, though he didn't say of what. He didn't yet know what kinds of signs to read. She did not embrace him. She had decided long ago that she would not, when this day came. She did not want to send a soft creature south. She wanted to send a useful one. He bowed his head to her. He said, "When I have what we wanted, I will send for you." She smiled then. The smile cost her something. She nodded once. He turned and started walking south. The road south takes a full month if you walk it. He walked it. He had silver in his pocket for ferries and inns, but he wanted the road in his legs. He wanted to know exactly how far it was. He slept in barns sometimes. He slept under a wool cloak in the open more often. He did not speak much to the people he met. He listened. The further south he went, the more they talked about the king. They said, Arthur is just, mostly. Arthur is fair with grain. Arthur is hard on bandits. Arthur's queen is beautiful and a little sad. Arthur's first knight is the best blade in the kingdom. They said. Arthur is haunted by something none of them quite knew. Sometimes he sat at the head of the round table and looked at the empty chairs around it, as if he expected someone. He stored each detail. Each one was a piece of the man he was walking toward. By the time the towers of Camelot rose on the horizon, he had a sketch of his father in his head. A working sketch. To check against. He did not enter the city that day. He sat down on the rise. He looked at the towers. He thought, there it is. The place that decided what I was. Before I had hands, there it is. He stayed there until sundown. He watched the lamps come on in the towers, one by one. He thought, patience. Watch, that is all. For now. He pulled his cloak around him and slept on the hill. In the morning he stood. He shook out the cloak. He fastened the bronze knotwork brooch at his shoulder. He walked down the rise toward the towers, the way someone walks toward their own answer. He was 18. He had been preparing for this all his life, though he had not always known it. He felt no fear. He felt no anger. He felt accurate. That is the word that came to him. Accurate. The guards at the gate asked his name. He gave it. They asked his mother's name. He gave it. One of them straightened slightly when he heard it. The other did not. The gate opened. He stepped through the gate into the courtyard. The flagstones were warm with morning. He stopped just inside. He took a long breath. He thought, I am here. The road begins. Patience. A steward came to him quickly. The steward bowed. He had clearly been told this young man might be coming. The steward said, the king is at his prayers. He will see you at the noon meal. He was shown to a small clean chamber high in one of the towers. He set down the satchel. He stood at the narrow window. He could see from here the very rise he had slept on the night before. He thought of his mother. He thought of the fishermen mending nets on the black rocks. He thought of how far the sound of that sea was from here. He missed it. He set the feeling carefully aside. When noon came, the steward returned. He led Mordred down winding stone stairs to the great oak doors of the throne hall. The doors were carved with knotwork dragons. 2 guards in red opened them. He stepped into the throne hall. The long stone room stretched ahead of him. Tapestries of red and gold knotwork hung between the columns. At the far end, 3 steps up, the high oak throne, and on it his father. He walked the length of the hall the way his mother had taught him. Slowly, patiently, not too fast, not too slow. He kept his eyes lifted but not insolent. He kept his hands open at his sides. 3 paces from the dais he stopped. He bowed. Not deep, the bow of a kinsman, not a beggar. He straightened. He looked his father in the face, properly, for the first time in his life. He had spent years building a sketch of this man in his mind. The sketch had been wrong in small ways. The man was older than he had pictured, more tired, kinder around the eyes, sadder too. The king spoke first. He said, "Welcome to Camelot. Your mother told me you were coming. I have set a place for you at the round table. I hope it will become your home." Mordred bowed again. He said, "Thank you, my king." Neither of them said the word they were both thinking. Neither of them said, "son" or "father." They said, "king" and "young man." They both knew what wasn't being said. They both let it pass, for now. That first night at Camelot, Mordred didn't sleep. The bed was too soft. The walls were too thick. The sea couldn't reach him here. He missed the noise of it the way you miss a heartbeat. He got up before dawn. He dressed in plain dark wool. He found his way down the winding stair to the empty courtyard. The night guards nodded at him. They had been told to let him pass. He found the training yard. The wooden practice posts were wrapped in straw, like at home. He picked up a practice sword from the rack. The weight was right. He let himself smile, just a little. He worked the slow, low guard his mother had taught him. He worked it the way you might pray, step by step, block by block. By the time the eastern sky was rose, pink, he had been at it for an hour. He didn't notice the man watching him from the doorway of the armory. A man in plain leather and a deep blue cloak, a man with a thin scar along his right jaw. Lancelot watched a while and then walked away. The first weeks at Camelot were full of small introductions. Knights with names he had heard in stories. Older than him, scarred, full of quiet kindness. He bowed to each one. He remembered each name. They all knew, of course. They didn't say. They never said. They simply treated him with the careful kindness reserved for the children of large secrets. Mordred saw the kindness. He felt the secret underneath. His chair at the table had been carved with his sigil, a coiled knot above a crescent moon. He hadn't given them a sigil. Someone had chosen one for him. He didn't ask who. He could guess. He noticed that his chair sat very slightly apart from the others. Not enough that any visitor would see. Just enough that he, sitting in it, knew. The great round table was not quite a perfect circle. He met the queen on the third day. She came into the great hall in pale blue linen and a thin gold circlet. Her honey gold braid hung down her back. She walked carefully. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. She greeted him formally. She asked about Orkney. She asked about the journey. She asked nothing about his mother. He noticed that. He stored it. He answered every other question politely. She wished him welcome. She withdrew. The hem of the pale blue gown swept across the flagstones as she went. He watched her go. He thought, she is unhappy. Then he thought, that is not my concern, yet. He fell into the rhythm of Camelot. Training in the morning, council in the afternoon, long dinners at the round table, long silences in his small tower chamber at night. He listened, he learned. The first time he met his father in private was at the end of his second week. The king summoned him to a small stone chamber off the throne hall. The chamber had a long table and 2 chairs, no throne. Arthur said, "Sit, please." Mordred sat. Arthur said, "I want this to be easier than it is. I am not sure it can be. Tell me what your mother has told you about me." Mordred took a long breath. He thought of his mother's instructions. He said, "She has told me you are my king. She has told me to serve you. She has told me very little else, my lord." Arthur looked at him for a long time. He looked the way a man looks at a wound he can't quite see the bottom of. Eventually he nodded. He said, "Thank you for that. I will try in time to fill in the rest." Mordred said, "Take your time, my king. I am young. I will be at Camelot a long while." Arthur smiled at that. It was almost a real smile. Almost. Mordred saw it and tucked it away. They drank a single cup of wine together. They spoke of small things. The harvest. The roads. A bandit problem in the north. They did not speak of Orkney. They did not speak of his mother. They did not speak of prophecy. When Mordred left the chamber, the king stood and watched him walk out. Mordred felt the eyes on his back. He did not turn around. He walked all the way to his tower, before he let out the breath he had been holding. After that, his father started to invite him more often, to councils, to hunts, to the small ceremony when a new knight took an oath at the round table. He did not yet call him son. He called him Mordred. Mordred did exactly what his mother had told him. He watched, he stored, he smiled politely. He did not push. He never asked a single thing of his father directly. He let his father do the offering. He began to notice things at the table that the other knights did not notice, or pretended not to. He noticed how the queen's eyes traveled. He noticed where they landed. He noticed how often. He noticed who looked back. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't even let his face know that he had seen. He simply added the observation to his growing inner book, in clear, careful handwriting, in the margin Queen and First Knight. The months passed. He turned 19. He turned 20. He became known among the knights as the quiet one, the careful one, the one who could be relied on never to start a fight and never to lose one. His father gave him his first sword that year. Not Excalibur. That was Arthur's alone. But a long plain iron longsword in a plain leather scabbard. Yours now. Use it well. Mordred bowed deeply. He wore it at his hip from then on. He noticed his father glance at it sometimes. He noticed the king watched it with the same sad expression. Mordred had seen the first day, in the throne hall, behind the welcome. Here's the part the stories rarely linger on. Mordred liked Camelot. He liked the knights. He liked the order. He liked the round table. The plan his mother had given him was beginning to taste of dust in his mouth. It was a strange feeling. He had come south to find a man he wanted to hate. He had found instead a tired aging king who was trying, clumsily, late, to be kind to him. He didn't know what to do with that. He wrote to his mother. He didn't tell her any of this. He told her about the harvest and the bandit problem, and the names of the senior knights. She wrote back asking, "And what do you think of the king?" He didn't answer that letter for 2 weeks. When he did, he wrote, "He is what we expected. Tired. Watch. Trying. Be patient." Then he set down the pen. He thought about what he had not written. That winter he went hunting with Arthur and 3 other knights. 3 days in the western forests, cold mornings, long silences on horseback. Arthur talked, slowly, about being young, about fearing things he no longer feared. One night by the fire, the other nights asleep, Arthur looked across the embers at Mordred. He said, "You have your mother's eyes. Did anyone ever tell you that?" Mordred said, "She did." "Off," Arthur said. When I knew her, I was very young. We were both very young. I didn't know who she was. I learned later." By then, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He was speaking of Mordred. Mordred looked up. He had not planned to speak, he said. "She told me." Arthur nodded slowly. He said, "Of course she did." The fire popped quietly between them. Neither said anything for a long time. Arthur eventually said, "I am sorry. I have not said that to you yet. I should have said it the first day. I am saying it now. I am sorry for what I did." He didn't say what he had done. He didn't need to. Mordred didn't say it was all right. It was not all right. He didn't say it was forgiven. It was not forgiven. He simply nodded once. He said, "I heard you." It was the most honest thing either had said all winter. They did not speak of it again that trip. They rode home to Camelot 4 days later, through a heavy snowfall. The knights sang travel songs to keep their teeth from chattering. Mordred did not sing. Arthur did not sing. They rode side by side. Back at Camelot, the snow piled against the walls. The hall fires burned high. Mordred wrote no letter to his mother that month. She wrote to him. He left the letter sealed on his table for a week before opening it. When he finally opened it, it was very short, 3 lines. His mother wrote, "You have gone quiet. That is Aloud. But remember why you went south. The king is good men's company. He is not your friend." He read the letter 3 times. He folded it. He held it over the candle flame. He watched the vellum curl up and turn black. He watched the ash fall in his palm. He thought, "I haven't forgotten. I just don't know yet." That spring he was knighted formally. Arthur lay Excalibur on his shoulders himself. The whole court watched. The queen watched too. So did the first knight. So did the empty chair at the round table where Merlin's seat had been. He took the oath, to serve, to protect, to keep the peace of the realm. He meant the words. He surprised himself by meaning them. His mother's voice was in the back of his head, very quiet. He let it go quiet. Afterwards there was a feast. The knights toasted him. Arthur made him sit at the king's right hand. The queen lifted her cup to him with a small, genuine smile this time. The first knight did the same. Mordred bowed his head. "Stay with this. It matters before the end." The young man who came south to undo his father is, at this point in the story, 10 breaths from loving him. He doesn't know it. The old stories don't usually say it. But it is true. But that summer, the small chamber off the throne hall had no fire in it some afternoons. and Mordred started to learn the rest of what was happening in Camelot. Not by being told, by looking carefully, by being patient. He noticed that the queen took a long walk in the apple orchard every afternoon. Always alone, she said. He noticed that the first knight was rarely on the training yard at the same hour. Always practicing alone, he said. He didn't follow them. He didn't need to. He simply noted the times. He simply noted who else was where in those hours and who else was conveniently not. The pattern took perhaps a month to confirm. He didn't tell his father. He didn't tell his mother. He didn't tell anyone. He thought, "This is not mine to know. But I know it. I have it. I will not use it, not unless." He set the book aside. Paused the young man at his chest, again for a moment. Because this is a story about the Round Table. And the Round Table deserves a word of its own. What it was for, and why it could not, in the end, hold. The Celts had been ruled by chieftains long before they were ruled by kings. Chieftains sat in a circle with their warriors. Everyone could see everyone. No one sat at the head, no one sat above. That was the old shape. Arthur built his table in that old shape on purpose. He had been a young king who knew his power was new. He wanted his knights to argue with him. He wanted no one chair to be the chair of last word. It worked for a while. Knights came from all over the Western world to sit in that circle. They argued. They voted. They served the realm together. The table was a small experiment in being equal. The experiment was beautiful while it lasted. But circles need a center. The center, in this circle, was Arthur. And Arthur was a man. A tired one. A frightened one. A loving one. The table held only as well as the man at its quiet middle held. Remember that. For later. Back to the young man at his chest. He kept his book of careful observations there. He went on with his life. He trained. He sat in council. He hunted with his father. He waited to see what the kingdom would do with itself. He was 22 when the first crack opened. A bandit lord in the western marches was caught and brought to Camelot in chains. He claimed protection, said a great knight had sworn him oath in secret. He named the first knight. The hall went very quiet. The first knight stepped forward from the half-circle of knights. He said, "I have never met this man before today." He spoke plainly, calmly. Arthur looked at him for a long time before he believed him. The king believed him. The bandit was taken away, the matter closed. But Mordred saw something pass across his father's face for a single second. A flicker of doubt, quickly buried. The king had wanted to believe, he had wanted very badly to. Mordred filed it away. Not yet. But also, yes, now he knew that his father knew somewhere very deep what was happening in his own house. The king was choosing not to look at it directly. That was a thing one could use. He didn't speak of any of this to anyone. He went on as before. He went on for almost a year as before. The longer he watched, the more it became clear. The kingdom rested on a single careful lie, kept by the people who loved each other most. He turned 23. He turned 24. He became one of the senior knights at the Round Table. He led small companies on small missions to the borders. He was good at it. He brought his men home every time. His father grew older. The iron-gray hair turned more silver than gold. The lines around the king's eyes deepened. He still rode out at the head of the hunts, but he tired earlier. He went to bed earlier. He laughed less easily. Mordred came to his father's private rooms more often now. To play simple board games. To listen to the king tell stories from before he was king. The king liked telling them. Mordred liked hearing them. Both pretended this was casual. One night the king told him about his own father. A man Arthur had barely known. Killed in battle when Arthur was a small boy. Arthur said, "I did not have a father long enough to learn how to be one. I wish I had." Mordred said, quietly, carefully, "It is not too late." Arthur looked at him for a long time. He didn't answer that with words. He simply moved the next piece on the board. The game went on. The fire popped softly. Neither cried. That same season the old white, bearded counselor returned to Camelot. Merlin had been away for years. No one had quite known where. He walked into the throne hall on a mid-morning, leaning on his knotwork staff, looking very tired and very old. Arthur embraced him. The whole court embraced him. The empty chair at the round table, the seat that had been his, was set with a cup of warm mead and a plate of fresh bread the same hour. Merlin sat in it that night and ate. He looked at Mordred across the table. He looked for a long time. He did not bow his head in greeting like the other knights had. He simply looked. Mordred met his eyes, neither said anything aloud. Both understood. The next morning, Merlin asked Mordred to walk with him in the apple orchard. Just the two of them. Mordred agreed. They walked slowly. Merlin's staff tapped softly against the grass path between the trees. Merlin said, "I have wanted to meet you for a long time." "I have not wanted to meet you for a long time." Both equally. Mordred said, "Yes. I understand. I have felt the same about you, my lord." They walked in silence for a while. Then Merlin said, "I was the one who told your father what he was told when you were still unborn. I am the reason your road has its shape. I have been making peace with that for 24 years. Mordred said, "Then tell me what you told him." Merlin did not look at him. Merlin said, "I told him a son of his sister would one day end his reign. I did not tell him to put any child in a boat. He chose that." Mordred said, "And do you still believe what you told him? That the prophecy will hold?" Merlin was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I believe the prophecy will hold if you and he both walk toward it. Not if either of you turns aside." He said, "If you tell him who you are plainly before he asks, if you let him see you, the road can change. He has waited many years for that moment. He has been preparing for it. You have too." Mordred said, "He already knows who I am." Merlin said, "He suspects who you are. He has decided not to ask, so that you can stay, if you say it aloud. You both have to act. That is the difference between thinking it and saying it." Mordred said nothing for a long time. He looked past the old man toward the high pale, stone walls of Camelot above the orchard. He thought of his mother. He thought of the king at the fire telling stories of his own dead father. Then he said, quietly, "Thank you, my lord. I will think on what you have said." He bowed slightly. He turned. He walked back through the orchard toward the great hall. He did not look back. He thought all the way. He thought for 3 days. He went to councils. He trained. He sat at the round table. He played one careful game with his father at the fire. He did not write to his mother. He did not speak of it to anyone. He let the choice settle. On the 4th night, after a long council, after the queen had gone to her chambers, and the first knight had gone wherever he went, Mordred asked his father to walk down with him to the underground chapel. Arthur agreed. They went down a winding stone stair. They came out in the high underground chapel. The low vaulted crypt, like chamber beneath the throne hall. 12 candles burning in iron brackets. The plain stone altar, the single wooden cross on it. Arthur said, "Why here, son?" The word came out before he could stop it. Both of them heard it. Both of them froze for a single breath. Arthur did not take it back. Mordred did not pretend not to have heard. Mordred said, "I want to tell you something. Plainly, I have been here 4 years. I think you already know. I want you to hear me say it. I am your son, Mordred, born to Morgas. I have always known." Arthur did not open his eyes. He stood very still in the candlelight. After a long while he said, "I have known since the day you walked into the throne hall. I had hoped I was wrong. I am glad I was not." "I am sorry," Mordred said. "I do not want to be in this story. I do not want to be the ending of you. I came south to take a kingdom from a man I had never met. I have met you now. I do not. I no longer." Arthur stepped forward. He took his son by both shoulders. He held him at arm's length. He looked into his face. He said, "I see you. I should have seen you 24 years ago. I am seeing you now. Forgive me if you can." Mordred could not speak. He nodded once. Then again, then a third time. His father pulled him into an embrace. They stood like that in the candlelight of the chapel for a long time. The wooden cross watched. The dead kings in their stone effigies watched. When they let go, Arthur said, "I want you at my side openly now. I want the court to know. I want the realm to know. You are my heir. I should have said this years ago. I am saying it now. We will say it tomorrow." Mordred said, "My king, my father." The two words together cost him something he had been holding for 24 years. He let it cost him. He says, "Tomorrow." They walked back up the winding stair together. They did not speak. Halfway up, the king reached for his son's hand. Mordred let him take it. They walked the rest of the way like that, fingers loosely linked, both very quiet. At the top they parted, each to his own chambers. Mordred lay awake all night. He looked at the dark ceiling. He felt the strange shape of the choice he had just made. He felt the prophecy let go. Or so it seemed. Picture that small chamber. The young man finally still, the lamp burning low, the realm sleeping. The father below in his own bed, eyes also open. Also still, also finally at peace. This is the high point of the first half of our story. But, and this is where the story makes its first sharp turn, the prophecy did not let go. It only changed shape. Outside in the night, a rider on horseback had just crossed the western marches. He carried a sealed letter for Arthur. He rode through the dark. The letter had come from across the sea, from the kingdoms of the south, from Brittany. A young king there had been raiding the western marches. He claimed Arthur's territories. He had taken 3 border keeps already. He was inviting battle. Arthur read it in his private chamber at dawn. He read it standing at the narrow leaded window. He set it down. He sent for his closest advisors. He sent for his first knight. He sent for his son. He said, "We march, I will lead." Mordred said, "I will ride at your side, my king, my father." Arthur looked at him. He smiled tiredly. He said, "No, you will stay. You will hold Camelot in my absence. You will be regent. That is your test now." Mordred stood very still in the dawn light of his father's chamber. He did not answer right away. He felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had not asked for it. It had been given. He said finally, "I will hold it for you. I will return it to you whole." Arthur said, "I know you will. That is why I am asking." The 2 old advisors exchanged a look. Lancelot looked at the floor. No one else spoke for a long moment. That same morning, the news ran through Camelot. The king would ride for Brittany within the week. He would take half the knights of the Round Table with him. Mordred would govern in his absence. The queen would stay. The first knight would stay also, to lead the home guard. Mordred met his mother's eyes. Not in the hall, but in his head. He could see her clearly, sitting at her loom in Orkney, hearing the news days later. He could hear what she would say. He pushed the imagined sound of her voice away. The next 6 days were a blur of preparation. Banners taken from chests, horses shod, provisions counted into wagons, maps unrolled and rolled again. Mordred at his father's side for every counsel, every order. Learning, storing, saying very little. His father said little about the night in the chapel. There was no time. The promise to name him heir openly was not made. Not yet. The realm could not absorb 2 great announcements in the same week. Mordred understood. He told himself he understood. On the 7th morning the army assembled outside the gates of Camelot. Hundreds of horses, banners snapping in the spring wind. The whole town awake before dawn to watch them ride out. Arthur put on his battle helm in the courtyard. Mordred buckled it for him. Arthur said, "Watch the queen, watch the first knight, watch the council. Most of all, watch yourself. The hardest test of regency is not being king. It is staying the man who said he would not be." Mordred nodded. He bowed his head. Arthur straightened in the saddle. He raised one gauntleted hand to the gathered army. He turned the gray horse south. The captains shouted. The horns blew. The whole column began to move. Mordred stood on the road and watched them go. He stood there until the last banner disappeared over the rise. Then he turned and walked back through the gates into the city. The townspeople did not bow exactly. They watched him pass. He felt the watching. He kept his face calm. The first weeks were quiet. He sat in council. He heard cases. He approved grain shipments. He read border reports. He was patient with the older lords who tested him. He was firm with the ones who pushed too hard. He sent no orders that his father would not have sent. The queen attended one council and then no more. She said it was not her place. She withdrew to her own chambers for the afternoons. She still walked the apple orchard. The first knight was rarely seen at mid-morning in the training yard as before. Mordred noticed. He said nothing. One afternoon Lancelot came to Mordred's working chamber. He brought a small report on the city watch. He stood at the door rather than entering. He was clearly preparing himself for something. Mordred set down his quill. He gestured him in. Lancelot said, "My Lord Regent, I want to say plainly, I serve your father. I serve the realm. I will serve you in his absence as I would him. If you and I have to talk about anything else, anything older, I would rather we did it now." Mordred looked at him for a long time. He had imagined this conversation many times. He had imagined himself using what he knew. He found that he did not want to. He found that he simply felt tired. He had not expected that. He said, "I have no business with anything older. I want the realm whole when my father returns. I want him to come back to the home he left. That is all I want. Serve me as you would serve him. We need not say more." Lancelot bowed his head, he said. "Thank you, my Lord Regent. I will not give you cause to reconsider." He turned and walked out. Mordred picked up his quill. He kept writing. He did not look up until the door had closed. A week later, the first letter came back from his father. It had been written from the road in Brittany. It said the army had reached the contested keeps. It said the campaign was going well. It said at the end, "I miss you, son. The fires here are smaller." He wrote back that same night. He told the king about the city watch, about the grain, about the lord's small grumblings. He kept it short and businesslike. At the end he wrote, "I am holding what you left me. Come home soon." He did not say more. He had not yet learned to write the softer things. Then his mother's letter arrived. He had been expecting it. It was longer than usual. She wrote, "You are regent. This is more than we ever hoped. Use it carefully. Use it well. Strengthen your own friends in the council. The king may not return. War in Brittany is unkind." He read it 3 times. He did not write back that night. He went to the sheer castle ramparts alone after midnight. He stood on the high parapet and looked at the dark, sleeping town. He felt his mother's voice in his head clearly now. He let it stay this time. He thought, "My mother is wrong about him. She has been wrong about him my whole life. He is not who she has built him into in her stories." Then he thought, "But my mother is not wrong about what is possible. She is right that war in Brittany is unkind." He did not write to his mother. He did not act on her letter. He kept governing as he had been governing. He gave careful orders. He listened to careful complaints. But something had shifted in him. He had begun very quietly to make sure of his ground. He found out which of the older lords would not have voted for his father if the choice had been theirs. He found out which younger knights felt their families had been overlooked under the round table. He did not act on any of it. He simply knew. A second letter came from his father 2 weeks later. The campaign was harder than expected. The Breton king was clever. Arthur said he would be away at least until autumn, possibly until winter. He sent his love. Mordred read it twice. He set it down. That night the queen sent for him. He had not seen her privately the whole of his regency. He went surprised. She was alone in her chamber. She had a cup of warm wine ready for him. She asked him to sit. He sat. She said, "I have not spoken honestly to you in 4 years. I would like to start now if you will let me. I am sorry I did not. I was afraid of what you would think of me. I am still afraid." But I do not want to be alone in this house. She told him everything. About her marriage at 16. About being given to a man she did not yet know. About loving him eventually. About also loving another badly. About not knowing what to do with two true things. She did not weep. She did not ask for forgiveness. She simply told him. When she was done, he said only, "Thank you for telling me. I did not ask. You owed me nothing." She looked at him. She said, "I know. That is why I wanted to." He drank his wine. He thanked her. He left. He did not look back. Walking back to his own tower in the dark, Mordred felt, for the first time, that he was now standing at the exact center of his father's house, holding it, loving it even, and he understood that this was the most dangerous moment for any prophecy. The moment it has almost lifted. The harvest came in heavy. The barns filled. The kingdom prospered under Mordred's careful hand. The third letter from his father said the campaign was now expected to last through the winter at least. Arthur asked for patience. Arthur sent his love. Mordred wrote back. He told his father about the harvest, about a new bridge being built at the river crossing, about the small daughter of one of the older lords who had asked the regent's permission to marry a young knight. He had said yes. He hoped his father would not mind. Autumn came hard. The leaves turned. The wind from the north grew teeth. The reports from Brittany came less often. When they came, they were shorter. The king's handwriting was tireder. Mordred read each one carefully. He kept them in his small wooden chest with the others. That autumn, two of the older lords, whose names he had carefully noted in his book, began to come more often to his working chamber. They brought small requests. They flattered him gently. They asked his opinion on matters that did not require his opinion. He listened politely. He gave nothing. They came back the next week. They came back the week after. By the end of autumn they had stopped pretending. They asked him plainly, "If the king does not return, my lord regent, and we hope he does, what will the realm do? Who will hold us?" He said, "The king will return. We will hold for him. That is the only answer the realm needs from me right now. Anything else would be premature. You may go." They went. He did not look up until the door had closed. But the question had been asked. He could not unhear it. Late that night, alone in his tower, he wrote a long letter to his mother. He told her everything. The queen's confession, the lord's question, his own slow softening toward the king. He did not seal it. He left it on the table overnight. In the morning he read it through. He folded it. He held it over the candle flame the way he had done with his mother's letter long ago. He watched the vellum curl up and turn black. He watched the ash fall in his palm. He kept the ash in a small clay pot on his desk. He thought, "I will not tell her. I will not tell anyone. I will simply hold. I will hold until he comes home. Then I will stand at his side openly and we will tell the realm together. That is the only road I will walk." But then, winter came. And in the second week of winter, the news came that no one was prepared for. A messenger rode in at dawn through heavy snow. He brought a letter sealed in foreign wax. He brought it not to Mordred, but directly to the queen. The letter was from one of Arthur's senior captains in Brittany. It had been written 4 days ago. The captain had wanted the queen to know first. The letter said, the king had been gravely wounded in a skirmish at a ford. He was alive, but he was not certain to live. She sent for Mordred at once. He came still in the plain dark wool he had thrown on. He read the letter standing in her chamber. He read it twice. He set it down. He looked at her. He said, "He will live. He always lives. I will go to him." She said, "He gave you Camelot to hold. You cannot leave it. Send word that the regent stands. Send our best healers. Send our prayers. He gave you this house. You owe him to keep it standing." Mordred looked at her for a long time. He nodded. He stayed. He sent the best healers within the hour. He sent gold for whatever they needed. He sent 2 senior knights to ride at the head of the relief column. He stayed at Camelot. He sat in council. He governed. He waited for the next letter. The next letter came 2 weeks later. The second letter said, the king was still alive. The wound had been deep. The healing was slow. He was being moved to a safer keep further from the fighting. He was in good hands. He sent his love to all. He did not write the letter in his own hand. The captain wrote it for him. For the rest of that winter, Mordred ruled Camelot in a kind of suspended grief. Not yet allowed to mourn. Not yet allowed to celebrate. He took every decision carefully. He governed steadily. He prayed in the chapel sometimes alone late at night. He had not prayed before. He found he liked it. But the lords who had been coming to him in autumn came more often. They brought more lords with them now. They brought younger knights. They brought a senior bishop from a southern see. They said the realm was beginning to drift. They said it needed a clear hand at the helm. They did not ask him to take the crown. Not yet. They asked him to regularize the regency. They asked for a formal oath ceremony. They asked the realm be reassured that the regent ruled as more than a placeholder. They said, until the king's safe return, of course. Mordred said, I will think on it. I will not refuse out of hand. I will not accept without prayer. Come back to me in 3 days. They bowed. They left. He sat alone at the desk. He looked at his folded hands. He thought of his father. He thought of his mother. He felt the shape of the road. That evening he wrote, for the first time in months, to his mother. He told her about the lords. He told her about the bishop. He told her about his father's slow, distant healing. He asked her, Mother, what would you do? He sealed the letter with his small bronze coil. He sent it north before dawn. His mother's answer came back in 7 days. Faster than any letter from Orkney had ever come. She had written it the moment his courier handed her the question. She wrote only 3 lines. Accept the oath ceremony. Do not call it a coronation. Govern openly. The king will not return. He did not act on her letter that night. He sat with it. He prayed in the chapel again. He went to bed. He did not sleep. He thought of his father. He thought of his father's hand on his shoulder at the dawn gate. He thought, he told me to hold. I am holding. In the morning he agreed to the oath ceremony. He insisted, clearly, that it was not a coronation. He insisted the wording state that he ruled in his father's name only. He insisted the king's empty throne be present in the hall. Then he walked out into the cold and let the lords arrange it. The ceremony took place a week later. The throne hall was full. The empty high oak throne stood on its days. Mordred stood on the lowest step in front of it. The bishop in dark blue robes laid the oath book in both his hands. He swore to serve the realm, to keep the king's house, to surrender it at his return. The court bowed to him in his father's name. He did not bow back. He turned to the empty throne. He bowed to it instead. Twice, deeply, the hall watched. Some understood. Some did not. He walked off the dais. He did not sit. He had not earned the seat. For 3 months after that, he governed openly. He sat in his father's chair at council. He gave orders in his own name. He still wrote to his father every week. The replies from Brittany came less and less often. When they came, they were shorter and shorter. The king was slow to mend. He was good at it, better than he had expected. The realm responded to him. Crops grew, markets stabilized. The roads were safer in spring than they had been in 3 years. The realm noticed. The realm was quiet with him in a way that felt like respect. He was 26, he felt 40. He grew older in those months. In carriage. His shoulders set differently. His mouth set differently. The pale gray, green eyes that had been watchful all his life were watchful in a new way now. The watching of a man with something to protect, rather than something to suspect. His mother came south that spring. She had not been to Camelot in over 20 years. She came in a small dark coach with 2 attendants. She did not announce herself. She arrived at midday. The guards did not know whether to bow or not. Mordred came down to the courtyard himself to meet her. He did not embrace her. She had taught him not to. She did not embrace him either. She simply looked at him for a long moment. She said, "You look like a king." He said, "I am not one." She smiled. She said, "Not yet." He led her to the small chamber off the throne hall. The same chamber his father had taken him to when he had first arrived 4 years ago. The long oak table. The two Chady had her seated. He sat across. He poured wine. He said, "Why are you here?" "Truly," she said, "because I have heard that you are governing well. Because I have heard that the realm loves you. Because I have heard also that you still write weekly to a man who has not written you a full letter in 3 months. And I came to ask you, what do you mean to do?" He did not answer right away. He turned the wooden cup slowly on the wood between his palms. He said, "I mean to give back what he left me when he returns. If he returns, I will not move on it before then. I gave my oath. I will keep it. That is my answer." She nodded once. She said, "I expected that. That is a good answer. It is the right answer for who you are now. I am not here to change it. I am here to tell you something else. Something I have not told you before. I have been carrying it for some time," she said. "Your father's wound at the ford in Brittany. It was not random. It was an attempt. The Breton king has been paid by someone close to Arthur, to keep him in the south as long as possible. Or, if possible, to keep him there forever," he said. "Ooh," she said. "I do not know yet. I came to tell you what I know. The rest you can find out yourself. You have more access than I do now. I would only say, start with the lords who came to you in autumn. The ones who wanted you to swear." He sat with it for a long moment. He thought of the 2 lords. He thought of the bishop. He thought of the oath ceremony. The way they had insisted on it. The way they had wanted him to be more than a placeholder. He thought, "Mother, do not be right about this. Mother, please do not be right." His mother said, quietly, "I do not enjoy bringing you this. I came south so that you would hear it from someone who has loved you all your life, not from a stranger. Find out the truth. Then act as you must. I will be in the city for 1 week." Then she rose. She left. He stayed there a long time. He did not sit back down. He did not call for anyone. He simply stood and breathed. He thought, "I will find out. I will find out the truth. And if she is right." He did not finish the thought. He didn't yet need to. Hold the young man at that window. Step back. Let me tell you something about Celtic kingship. Because what happens next in this story only makes its real sense if you know what a Celtic king actually was. It was not what we mean by king now. A Celtic king was married to the land. Literally, there was a ceremony. Sometimes a real one with a chosen mortal woman. Sometimes a symbolic one with a horse or a cup of mead or a turned ring of grass. The land chose him. He served it. If he failed it, the land withered. If the king kept his oath, the crops grew. If the king broke his oath, the crops failed. The connection was not magical, exactly. It was relational. A king who broke faith with the land had nothing left to bind his people to him. The bindings simply lost their grip. Arthur understood this in his bones. He had been a young king with a sword and a stone. He had been told he was chosen. He had spent his whole reign trying to be worthy of having been chosen. He had failed in private ways. He had succeeded in public ones. The land had stayed with him. But Mordred was now learning something his father had also had to learn. The land did not love the man. The land loved the keeping of the oath, and the keeping of the oath was a thing one chose, in the small hard hours, again and again. The next test of that was coming. Stay with this. It matters. The next week, Mordred set very carefully about finding out. He did not move openly. He did not arrest anyone. He simply asked the right questions of the right people. He read letters. He listened to merchants. He spoke to 2 clerks in the treasury about which lords had recently sent gold abroad. Within 4 days he had 2 names. Within 6 days he had 3. One of them was the senior bishop. One was the older lord who had spoken most strongly for the oath ceremony. One was someone Mordred had not expected at all. He sat at his desk and stared at the third name a long time before he believed it. His mother was right about the first two. She had been wrong about there being only two. There had been three. The third was a man Mordred had trained beside, a man he had thought a friend. A young knight from a smaller western house. A man who had wept openly the day Mordred was knighted. He did not act that night. He did not act the next day. He went to the underground chapel alone at dawn. He knelt at the altar. He prayed for a long time. He prayed not for vengeance. He prayed to be steady. He prayed that whatever he did next was steady. When he rose, he had decided. He would not move openly. He would not announce. He would not punish in court. He would write privately to his father in Brittany. He would lay out the names. He would ask the king to choose how the realm should answer. He would give the king back his crown intact. He sealed it himself. He sent it south with two of his most trusted men. He told them to ride hard. He told them to put it only in his father's own hands. He went on with his governance. He sat in council. He looked the three traitors in the eye every day and showed nothing. Patience. The old habit. For a week he waited. For two. The answer he expected from his father did not come back. Instead, after 12 days, his two trusted men returned to Camelot. They came alone. They came at midnight. They came with their faces grim. They asked for him privately. They told him. The keep where the king had been recovering had been attacked 4 nights ago. A small force. Targeted. The king's healers had been killed. The king himself was missing. The captain who had been writing the letters for him was dead. No body had been found for Arthur. None. They had spent a week searching. They had asked. They had threatened. The truth had finally come from a tavern keeper who had seen too much. A small group of men in dark cloaks had taken the king alive. They had taken him south, to the coast, onto a ship. They had not been able to follow the ship. They had not been able to learn its destination. They had returned to tell him. They told him they were sorry. They told him they had carried the letter and not delivered it. They had it still. Did the Lord Regent want it back? Mordred told them, quietly, to keep what they had learned to themselves. He thanked them. He told them to rest in the lower town for 1 full day before being seen. They bowed. They left. He stood alone in the anteroom with the unopened letter to his father in his pale hand. He went back to his tower. He did not sleep. He sat at his small writing table with the unopened letter in front of him. He thought about all the things he had not allowed himself to think about for the last week. He thought about his father. He thought, for the first time in his life, that he might never see him again. By dawn he had decided. He would not announce his father's disappearance publicly. He would tell the council privately the next morning. He would let the realm understand it slowly, naturally. He would ride himself with a small force to find his father. He would not stop until he had. That was the plan. The council the next morning was the strangest of his regency. He told the senior knights and the bishop and the older lords plainly. The king had been taken. They needed to plan. He watched them all very carefully as he spoke. He watched the 3 names from his book. He saw what he had needed to see. He let the council discuss for an hour. He listened to every voice. He said little. He noticed the 3 suggesting calm. He noticed they suggested he stay at Camelot, not ride south himself, to keep the realm steady. He noticed they suggested a senior knight ride instead. He noticed which knight they suggested. He thanked them all. He said he would consider. He dismissed them. He held back one man, a senior knight named Bedwyr, a man older than him by 20 years, a man who had served his father since both of them were young. He brought Bedwyr alone into the small chamber off the throne hall. Mordred told him everything, the 3 names, the investigation, the unopened letter to his father, the intercepted attack, the plan to ride south himself. He asked Bedwyr, "I need someone I can trust to hold Camelot while I am gone. Will you? Do you trust me to come back?" Bedwyr was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I have served your father since I was 19. I will hold his house for you while you find him. I trust you to come back. I trust you to bring him back." "Go." Mordred bowed his head. He said, "Thank you." That night Mordred made his preparations to leave at dawn. 2 senior knights, 20 mounted men, provisions for a month. He told only Bedwyr and his mother. He went to his mother's chamber in the lower town where she was staying. He told her his plan. He asked her advice. His mother listened to all of it. When he was done, she did not argue. She said, "You are a better man than I have raised. That is my failure or my triumph. I no longer know which. Go, bring him back. Use your patience. Use your knots. They are the only true things I gave you." He left her at midnight. He went back to his tower. He slept 3 hours. He dressed in plain dark mail under his cloak. He fastened the bronze knotwork brooch at his shoulder. He buckled the iron longsword his father had given him at his left hip. He went down to the courtyard at dawn. But the road south did not give Mordred what he had ridden for. Not the king. Not the trail of the king. Not anything but mile after mile of Cold Spring Road. He rode for 2 weeks. He searched the coast. He paid information. He found 1 tavern keeper. He learned almost nothing. While he was gone, things changed at Camelot, not because Bedwyr was a bad regent. Bedwyr was a good one. But because 2 messengers arrived from Brittany. Both false, both saying the same thing. Both claiming that the king had been found. That he was dead. That he had died of his wounds 2 weeks past. Bedwyr held the news for as long as he could. He sent fast riders north and south to find Mordred. He kept the lords and the bishop in council. He said the king was missing. That was all anyone needed to know. But the rumor still moved through the lower town in 3 days. By the 7th day the whole realm believed the king was dead. The bishop and the older lord and the young knight saw their moment. They had been preparing for it for months. They moved on the 8th day. They came to Bedwyr with a delegation of supporters. They demanded a regency council. They demanded the regent, meaning Mordred, be formally crowned upon his return. Bedwyr refused, he said. "The Lord Regent has not returned. The king has not been confirmed dead. There will be no coronation. There will be no regency council. The Lord Regent's instructions remain in force. We will wait." His refusal was firm. It cost him. He was a good man. He was not a king. They waited 2 more days. Mordred had still not returned. The bishop and the older lord gathered 20 knights of their own factions. They walked into Camelot throne hall at midnight. They presented Bedwyr with a written demand. They said, "Step aside. The realm needs a king. We will crown him when he returns." Bedwyr said, "No." He drew his sword. He stood at the foot of his old friend's dais. 20 knights stood across from him. A senior knight named Say stepped from the shadows behind Bedwyr. Then another named Lucan. Then 3 more. Loyal men. Then 6 more. Then 10. The throne hall filled slowly with men taking sides. The fight was short and very bad. Inside the great hall at midnight, 40 men in mail with drawn swords on the polished stone floor between the columns. By dawn it had ended. Bedwyr was alive but wounded. C was dead. 6 of the bishop's knights were dead, 3 of Bedwyr's. The young knight from Mordred's book was dead. The bishop and the older lord were captives. Bedwyr sent fast riders again, to find Mordred, to tell him what had happened, to tell him to come home as quickly as a horse could carry him. The riders found him 3 days later on the coast of southern Britain. He was sitting at an inn fire, his small force around him. He had failed to find his father. He was preparing to ride further south. They told him. He sat down. He set the wooden cup back on the table very carefully. He looked at the fire. He looked at his own hands. He looked at the men around him. He stood up. He said, "We ride for Camelot tonight. Eat now. Eat fast." Then he walked out into the night air alone. They rode for Camelot. 4 days hard. Mordred barely slept on the road. He thought all the way. He thought about C dead, about Bedwyr wounded. About his father somewhere south on a ship, alive or not. About the bishop and the older lord captive, awaiting his judgment. About the realm, about what it now needed. When he reached Camelot, the gates were open. The guards were his guards. Bedwyr was still wounded but alive in his chambers. The bishop and the older lord were still in the dungeons. The realm was holding its breath. The whole city knew the regent had come back. They watched him ride in. Nobody bowed. Nobody looked away. He did not stop in the courtyard. He rode straight to Bedwyr's chambers. He left his men in the yard. He spent an hour with the old knight. Bedwyr told him everything. They wept together briefly for sea. Then Mordred stood. He went to the dungeons. He stood in front of the bishop's cell. He looked at the man through the iron bars. He did not speak to the bishop. He simply looked. The bishop did not look away. Both understood. Mordred turned. He walked back up the long stone stair. He went to his own chambers. He bathed. He slept 4 hours. He woke at dawn. He called the council. He said, "We must act." Stop the young man at the head of the table. Step back one last time before the end. Let me tell you why the Arthurian myth, this exact story, this exact betrayal, survived 1500 years and still gets told and retold in every century, in every medium. It is not for the reason most people think. It is not because of the heroism. There are plenty of heroic stories. It is not because of the magic. There are plenty of stories with wizards and swords and stones. It is not even because of the love triangle. There were love triangles before the Arthurian one, and many after it. It survived for one reason. It put the saddest possible question at the heart of a great story. The question is, what do you do when the people you most want to love each other cannot? When their love would unmake the world? The Arthurian story holds that question in its center like a stone in a fist. Arthur loves Guinevere. Guinevere loves Lancelot. Lancelot loves Arthur. Mordred loves all three of them badly, the way a young person loves people who do not quite know how to make room for him. None of these loves are wrong. All of them, together, are catastrophic. That is why the story survives. Because every century rediscovers that exact question. Because every life touches some version of it. Because we all know, somewhere, what it is to love people who cannot quite love each other in the way our love requires. Now back to the council. Back to the young man at the head of the table. He told the council what he intended. He would not be crowned. He would not punish in haste. The bishop and the older lord would stand trial publicly under Camelot's old laws. Then he would lead a force back to Brittany himself, with a better intelligence, and find his father. He asked the council to back him. They did, unanimously. He set the trial for 1 week. He set the new expedition to Brittany for 2 weeks. He sent his fastest courier south once more, with a new letter to whatever loyal commanders still served his father, telling them to coordinate with him on his coming arrival. Then he went back to his tower. He slept 12 hours straight. But the story will not let him have those 2 weeks. On the 3rd day after that council, a single ship made landfall at the southern coast of Britain. A dark Breton ship with a black sail. It carried 3 passengers. The leader of them rode north for Camelot the same hour. He rode with terrible news. He reached Camelot at dawn on the 5th day. He asked at the gates for the Lord Regent. He gave a name that the guards recognized. A senior steward of the Breton court, a man who had been in Arthur's company during the campaign. They brought him in immediately. They brought him to Mordred's working chamber. He bowed. He spoke. The steward said, "My Lord Regent, I have come from Brittany. I have come with my own hands at risk. I have to tell you in person." He paused. He said, "Your father is alive." Mordred's hands clenched on the desk. He said, the steward said, "He is at sea. He is sailing here. He should arrive in 3 days." Mordred said, "Thank God. Thank God," 3 times. The steward did not interrupt him. The steward waited. When Mordred had stopped, the steward said, "Quietly, there is more. My lord, your father believes you have moved against him. He sails here with 7,000 men. He sails to take Camelot back." The steward told him the rest. False letters had reached the king in Brittany during his recovery. Letters written in Mordred's hand, sealed with Mordred's bronze coil. Letters saying Mordred had taken the crown. Letters saying he had married the queen. Letters saying Arthur was not welcome to return. None of them written by Mordred. Mordred said, "Who wrote these? Who got them to him?" The steward said, "I do not know who wrote them. I know who took them to him. The young knight you trained beside. The one your father loved well. He was a courier. He died, recently, at Camelot, I gather. He died too soon for us to learn more," Mordred said quietly. The steward said, "Yes, my lord. I am sorry. I rode straight to you. I have no more news than this. Your father will land at the southern coast in 3 days. He will march for Camelot. He will not stop to ask questions. Forgive me." He bowed. He stood. Mordred thanked him. He had him given a chamber, food, sleep. He sent a runner to Bedware. He sent a runner to his mother. He sent a runner to the senior loyal knights. He called the council for noon. He stood up from the desk. He walked once across the working chamber. He set both hands against the wall. At noon he stood at the head of the round table. He told them everything. The forged letters. The army on the sea. The 3 days. He said, "My father is coming home believing I am his enemy. I do not know if I can prove otherwise in 3 days. We may have to fight him. I have to ask all of you, will you fight him with me? Or will you stand aside?" They stood with him. To a man. Even the wounded Bedware stood with him. Even the few who had wavered earlier stood with him. They did not stand with him to fight Arthur. They stood with him to march south, to meet the army on the Bracken Plain at Camlann battlefield, and try one last time to send a parley before swords were drawn. They marched out the next dawn, 3,000 mounted men, 5,000 on foot, banners of red and gold, banners with Mordred's small new coil and crescent sigil beside them. They rode south. They reached Camlann battlefield on the second evening. They made camp in the bracken. Across the slow river, on the far rise, the king's army was already in camp. He sent the parley at dusk. 3 of his most senior loyal knights, unarmored, riding under a white banner, carrying the Breton steward with them as witness. They crossed the river. They were received in Arthur's camp. They presented their case. Arthur, exhausted and grieving, hesitated. He agreed to meet his son the next morning at dawn at the center of the field. Alone. To talk. At dawn the next day Mordred and Arthur walked toward each other across the Bracken Plain. Unarmed they had agreed. Just the 2 of them. Behind them, 2 armies stood at attention along their respective lines, watching. The mist of Camlann battlefield rose slowly off the slow river. The whole plain held its breath. Father and son met at the center. They spoke, quietly. For a long time, Mordred showed Arthur the forged letters. Arthur understood. Arthur wept openly. Father and son embraced at the center of the Bracken Plain. Both armies watched. Both armies began slowly to set down their weapons. A single thing then happened. Small, almost accidental. A single thing. We will return to it tomorrow. For now, just hold this image. The 2 armies. The 2 men. The mist rising. The first true peace either of them had known in a long time. Hold it. Stay there. A small adder slid through the bracken at the feet of one young soldier on Arthur's side. He drew his sword to kill it. The flash of the blade in the morning sun. Both armies saw it. Both armies thought the parley had been broken. Both armies charged. There was no stopping it. Neither side could hear orders over the roar. Father and son stood at the center as the wave came toward them from both directions. They had only seconds. They turned. They ran back to their respective lines. They drew their swords. They had been given no other choice. The battle was the worst either kingdom had ever known. Thousands fell. The Bracken Plain became dark. The slow river ran red by midday. Mordred fought at the head of his men. Arthur fought at the head of his. Neither sought the other out. Both knew they were going to meet at the center. Both delayed it. By late afternoon, both armies had broken. Most were dead. Most of the rest were too wounded to stand. Mordred stood at the center of the plain with perhaps 30 men left around him. Across the bracken he saw his father, with perhaps 30 men of his own. The two groups stood and looked at each other for a long time. Neither moved. Arthur stepped forward alone. He walked across the bracken alone. He carried Excalibur lowered. He stopped at 3 paces. Mordred stepped forward to meet him. He carried his iron longsword lowered. Both faces were wet. Both said nothing for a long moment. Then Arthur said, very quietly, "I do not want to do this." Mordred said, "Neither do I. But the field has decided. We are both kings now. Of nothing, I am sorry, father. I am sorry for every man on this plain. I am sorry for both of us." Arthur nodded. He said, "I forgive you. You forgive me." Mordred said, "Yes, I forgive you. We have a moment first." They stood there a long moment. The two small surviving groups of their men around them, very still on either side. Then Mordred said, quietly, "When we lift our blades, my king, do not flinch." "I will not. We finish this so the field stops. So our men can leave." Arthur said, "Yes." Then yes. Both raised their swords. Both struck. Excalibur went through Mordred's mail just below the ribs on the left side. The iron longsword Arthur had given his son went through the king's mail at the same place on the same side. Father and son stood, very still, with their blades joined in each other. The plain went very quiet. They held there for a breath, both still standing. Mordred said, "Father." Arthur said, "Son." They lowered each other carefully to the ground together. They lay side by side in the bracken at the center of the plain. The plain did not move. The two surviving groups began, slowly, to come forward. The two surviving groups did not finish each other. Not when they saw their leaders down. Not when they saw the two of them lying calmly side by side, still alive, still talking softly. Both groups simply set down their weapons. Both groups walked forward. They came to their kings. They knelt around them in the bracken. They wept. Mordred said, quietly, "Take my father from this field. Carry him gently. Find the lake, the barge, the 3 women. The old stories new. Take him, bedlive, wounded, kneeling in the bracken beside him. Wept openly." He said, "And you," Mordred said, "I will be along maybe. Soon enough. Go." They lifted his father carefully on a litter of cloaks and spear shafts. They carried him west, toward the lake, toward the Avalon shore. Mordred lay where they had laid him, in the bracken, alone but for one night who would not leave him. Bedwyr stayed. They watched the sun sink slowly toward the western hills. Mordred said softly to Bedwyr, "If he lives, and the old stories say he will, somewhere, somehow, tell him I forgave him. Tell him I knew at the end that he had been trying. Tell him I knew the letters were forged. Tell him I knew. Tell him," he paused, his voice tired, "tell him I loved him. Plainly I loved him." Bedwyr nodded. He said, "I will tell him. I will find him. I will tell him." Mordred smiled, actually smiled slowly at the corner of his mouth, the first real smile in months. He said, "Good. Then I have done what I came south for. Truly, I did not betray him. I came home. He died at twilight. He died on a plain his ancestors had walked. He died with one true friend beside him. He died smiling faintly. He died forgiven. He died forgiving. The land took him quietly back. The dusk fell soft. Bedwyr stayed beside him until full dark. Then he stood. He carried him east, by hand, toward the standing stones. Here is the thing the older stories try to teach us. Mordred was not a villain. Not really. Not in the deep telling. He was a boy who was told a story about himself before he could hold a stick. He was a boy who tried, the whole adult length of his life, to walk away from that story. The story walked beside him anyway. The story finally caught him. That is the cruelty of all stories told too early about a person. We become them, even when we are trying very hard not to. Even when we have, for many years, almost stepped away. The shape of the road takes its shape from the names we were given. and from the names other people were given for us. That is what the old myth is asking us quietly, each century when we pick it back up. It is asking, what stories were you given about yourself before you had hands? What did you build out of them? What did you build despite them? What if you set one down gently tonight, just to see who is underneath? And the old myth is also asking about Arthur, about what kind of love a father owes the child who frightens him, about whether you can be a good king and a bad father, about whether you can be a good father late, very late, after a very long mistake. The old myth says yes, late is still real, late still counts. That is what survives from this story 1500 years on. Not the swords, not the prophecy, not even the great round table. What survives is two hands meeting at the center of a quiet field. Father and son, late, both forgiving, both forgiven, both saying, finally, the simple word, yes, before the field decides. The story did not stop at the Bracken Plain. It moved on quietly by boat, by harper, by scriptorium, by campfire. Mordred's name traveled into 1,000 other rooms across 1,000 other nights. Each room kept what it needed and let the rest go. The first written versions made him a villain, pure and simple, a traitor in a coil and crescent surcoat. That was the version most of the medieval church preferred. It was easy, it was useful. It made Arthur perfect by contrast. Most people for many centuries only knew that version, but Welsh tradition kept the older shape. In the Welsh tellings, Mordred is more complicated. Sometimes Arthur's nephew, sometimes his son, sometimes a quiet good ruler in his own right, whose only real failure was that he existed at all. The Welsh remembered the human part. Tennyson in the 1800s made him a quiet villain again. A modern poet's villain, clever, cold, calculating. A useful figure for a Victorian morality that wanted clear edges around its kings. Tennyson did beautiful work. He did Mordred a little dirty, in retrospect. But the poems are still beautiful. T.H. White in the 1900s did better. In his telling, Mordred is a sad boy. A boy raised by a woman who was wounded too young. A boy who never had a chance. T.H. White let us feel sorry for him. Not too sorry. Just enough that we could see ourselves in him briefly. In the 1980s, films and TV picked him up. Sometimes he was a sneering antagonist in armor. Sometimes he was a tragic son with eyes like his father's. Sometimes both in the same film, in different scenes. The modern eye looked at Mordred and saw a question, not an answer. Video games kept him alive in their own way. They put him at the end of dungeons. They put him in the family trees of role-playing campaigns. A new generation of players met Mordred not in books, but in a long quest, late at night, on a quiet screen. The story kept finding ways forward. Modern novelists keep returning to him. Some give him a wife. Some give him children. Some give him a different ending, Kunder, where he and Arthur reconcile fully and ride together north. Some give him a sadder one. Each generation pulls the same name back out of the fire to ask the same question. The question is always the same. Are we born what we were told we would be? Or are we something else, walking through that telling, every day, trying to choose? The Arthurian story does not answer it. It just hands the question on. Each century picks it back up. Tonight we picked it back up. And, gently, we will set it down again. The young man on the Bracken Plain. The father carried west to the misty lake. The mother in her hall with the candle burning low. The two armies that ended one another. The slow river still running. Set it all down now, softly. The lake at dawn. Silver mist on still water. The old stories all agreed on this much. The dying king was carried to a misty shore. A long wooden barge drifted at the reedy edge. 3 hooded women in dark green robes stood quietly at the prow. The lake breathed. The mist breathed. The dying king was laid gently down. The barge slipped from the reeds. It drifted out into the silver mist. Next time, somewhere colder, older, a different kind of fire. For now, the lake, the mist, the slow drift. Somewhere on a black northern coast, a woman at her loom set her shuttle down. The candle flame steadied. She did not weep. The Bracken Plain at full dark, The fallen carried in by torchlight. The slow river running quiet now. Camelot in the dawn. The pale stone tower quiet. The banners furled. The town beginning to wake. The road north stretches empty under a brightening sky. Old stones, soft heather. The wind goes quiet. Set the story down softly. Both armies. Both men the two hands that finally met. Let it rest. Sleep softly. The old stories will keep. We'll be here when you're ready. Good night.